According to the Japan National Tourism Organization, in the 6th century, Buddhism was introduced to Japan by China and Korea. In the early 7th century, Prince Regent Shotoku, a great admirer of Buddhism, carried out political reforms, established a constitutional government, sent Japanese scholars to China to study Buddhism, and constructed a number of temples. He was influenced by Confucian principles, including the Mandate of Heaven, which suggested that the sovereign ruled at the will of a supreme force. Under Shotoku's direction, Confucian models of rank and etiquette were adopted, and his 17-article constitution suggested ways to bring harmony to a chaotic society. After Shotoku's death, a revolt led by Prince Naka and Nakatomi Kamatari took place, and they seized control of the court and introduced the Taika reform. Although it did not constitute a legal code, the Taika reform mandated a series of reforms that established the Ritsu-ryo system. Ritsu was a code of penal laws, while Ri was an administrative code. Combined, the two terms came to describe a system of patrimonial rule based on an elaborate legal code that emerged from the Taika reform. The Taika reform divided the country into provinces headed by governors appointed by the court, and the provinces were further divided into districts and villages.
Political systems and Japanese social values pressured people to resolve their problems without a third party or lawyer before the Meiji era in 1868. Law was mostly based on social custom before this era, according to Elliot J. Hahn in the Northwestern Journal of International Law and Business. Confucianism played a large role in Japanese law under the Tokugawa shogun. Confucianism stresses the maintenance of social harmony, so it pushed potential litigants to settle problems on their own. Conciliation dominated civil procedure in Tokugawa, Japan, and the rights of the individual were insignificant. The goal is to preserve the wa, the harmony between the parties. Under the Tokugawa period from 1603 to 1868, Japan became a rigid hierarchy based off the feudal system. The military castes governed and demanded obedience from inferior classes. The shogun spread complicated rules of propriety, called giri, which dictated a person's conduct and relationships in society. The giri was based on such traditional social roles as father and son, husband and wife, and landowner and farmer. Giri was enforced by threatening to destroy one's honor if violated, in a society where honor equated fate. There were no lawyers in the Tokugawa era. After the Meiji Restoration of 1868, the Japanese government adopted a Western legal system and was heavily influenced by the system of civil law in Germany. Japan's current constitution, adopted in 1947 after World War II, also shows the influence of American common law. Today, the legal system is a mix of German and U.S. law. The importance of women in early Japanese culture is also indicated by their legends regarding the creation of the world. In these tales, the sun goddess Amaterasu played a central role, and her worship became the central element in Shinto religion developed by the island peoples. Shinto devotees worship numerous gods and spirits associated with the natural world. In the centuries after the introduction of Buddhism, Chinese influences were felt in virtually all spheres of Japanese society. Alongside the traditional warrior elite, a class of monks and scholars developed that for several centuries exercised considerable power at the imperial court. Trade with China and improved communications within Japan enriched existing merchant groups and led to the emergence as a distinct class. New tools and techniques imported from the mainland increased the output of Japanese cultivators and made a great expansion of the island's previously marginal mining industry possible. For some centuries, the position of women within the family remained strong. An ideal of wives and lovers who were accomplished in the literature and the arts were preserved by the courtly elites at the imperial capitals. But the adoption of Chinese law codes destroyed at first the control that Japanese women were able to exercise with regard to their own children and eventually their overall status relative to men. These changes were reflected in the spread of polygamy among the Japanese aristocracy. From the 9th century, the changes were underscored by the elite's refusal to allow women from the imperial family to rule in their own right like they had before. Increasingly, Japanese women, like those in China, were subordinated in patriarchy and valued mainly for their domestic skills and ability to produce many healthy sons. As in China, entry into religious orders or successful careers as courtesans provided virtually the only alternatives to careers as subordinated wives and mothers.
The role of women in Japanese society did not improve much in the early Meiji era after 1868. Women were denied the right to join political parties until 1922, and did not achieve the right to vote until after World War II, despite 2 waves of feminist movements, according to womeninworldhistory.com. Women were controlled by the head of their household, and were expected to be good wives and wise mothers. Today, Japan plays an important role on the world stage, especially economically. Japan was named the 3rd most powerful economy by Telegraph.co.uk. Major industries in Japan include motor vehicles, electronics, machines, and metals. Japan is also a member of the United Nations, and is considered to be one of the most powerful nations in the world for its economic and military capabilities. Japan's Prime Minister, Shinzo Abe, recently said that climate change is one of the biggest problems facing the world today. To work against climate change, Abe has proposed a 26% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. Not only has Japan made climate change a top priority domestically, but it has also been contributing funds to help vulnerable developing nations make progress on emissions, according to CNN. Japan is also a forerunner in medicine, and has been donating money to key medical research, as well as to assisting women around the world access to medical care and education. One important change in Japanese politics is the lowering of the voting age from 20 to 18, which the Diet, the parliamentary body, has recently approved. The use of nuclear energy is also an issue in Japan today. Since the Fukushima disaster, the reactivation of nuclear power plants is controversial, though the government says Japan needs nuclear energy. Other political issues in Japan are international, as it is concerned about China's reclamation projects in disputed areas of the South China Sea, according to the Japan Times. Japan also has had disputes with Russia for its annexation of the Crimean Peninsula, and in the long-running sovereignty dispute over 4 Russian-held islands off Hokkaido that were seized in World War II. Beginning in the 4th century, Japan became increasingly influenced by the Chinese judicial system and adopted a penal system including punishments like the death penalty. However, beginning in the Nara period, cruel punishments and the death penalty were used less frequently as a result of the spread of Buddhism, and the death penalty was phased out completely in the Heian period. The death penalty was not used for the next 300 years, until the Genpei War. During the following Kamakura period, capital punishment was widely used and methods of execution became increasingly cruel, and included methods like burning, boiling, and crucifixion, according to the Japan National Tourism Organization. Eventually, harsher methods of execution came into use, such as upside-down crucifixion, impalement by spear, sawing, and dismemberment. Even minor offenses could be punished by death, and family members or neighbors could be punished along with the offender. These harsh methods and liberal use of the death penalty continued throughout the Edo period and into the Meiji period, but due to the influence of Confucianism, offenses against masters and elders were increasingly punished much more harshly than offenses against those of lower rank. In 1871, as a result of a major reform of the Penal Code, the number of crimes punishable by death was decreased, and excessively cruel torture and flogging were abolished. In 1873, another revision resulted in a further reduction in the number of crimes punishable by death, and methods of execution were restricted to be beheading or hanging. Between 1946 and 1993, 766 people were sentenced to death by Japanese courts. The widespread use of the death penalty as criminal punishment in the historical Japanese legal code is reflected in the use of the death penalty in the United States today. The death penalty is quite controversial, as many argue it violates human rights, while others view it as a necessary method of retribution. Compared to the average of 17 people per year that were executed in Japan from 1946 to 1993, the U.S. has executed 1,409 people since 1976, which averages to 36 executions per year. 19 states have outlawed the death penalty, and bills to abolish capital punishment are commonly seen in state legislatures. In 2013, Maryland abolished the death penalty.